He wrote and sings a song about ordinary people, but he is anything but ordinary. John Legend is the first African-American male to be named an EGOT for winning an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Award. I went one-on-one with Legend before his performance at the Beloved Benefit, a celebration of the community. The Atlanta community is one that Legend is involved in through his charitable organization, Human Level. So how did Atlanta get to be one of the cities for Human Level?
Well, one of the things that we care about is working closely with local government. So when we are looking for partners, we look for mayors and city halls who are interested in working with our fellows, giving them projects that will really help edify the communities that we serve. And so Atlanta was a willing partner, and we've had willing partners throughout the country. And the whole thesis behind Human Level is that we work in local government to address the needs of people who've often been marginalized and ignored and underrepresented in those spaces. And we want to do it in partnership with local government so that they are bought into what we're doing. And so it's not just us kind of working on the side, on a side project, but doing something that's really integrated into how the city is actually run.
What have you done so far in Atlanta?
So we've worked a lot on affordable housing and also on healthcare access, and we work on projects throughout the country that a lot of times are related to affordable housing, because that's a big issue facing a lot of the country, and particularly when it comes to Black and brown communities, a lot of times the wealth gap is driven by our lack of access to affordable housing, lack of access to being able to invest in our own assets, real estate assets. And so one of the ways we try to close that gap and improve equity in communities is by making sure people have access to affordable housing.
Now, I know you're here for the Beloved event and you're going to perform, but how does Beloved event and Same House mesh with Human Level?
Well, it's all about connecting to the real needs of the community, making sure, especially on the ground locally, that we're talking to organizers, community activists, people who are on the ground really working with folks and making sure their needs are being met and that their desires are being represented in the halls of power. And I think all of these organizations are working together to make sure people who often are ignored, people who are often underrepresented, have a voice, have a seat at the table, and that their needs are being met.
You started playing piano when you were 4 years old.
Yes, I did.
So that means you were doing it by ear.
I was doing both. I was learning how to play, reading the notes, but also learning to play by ear. I grew up in the Pentecostal church in Springfield, Ohio. You know, one of my cousins, but we grew up together in church. And our grandmother, she was the organist for our church, and so she would show me how to play gospel music, but I was also going to classical lessons at the same time and learning how to read music and play by reading as well.
So why did you not major in music when you went to the University of Pennsylvania rather than English and with an emphasis on African American literature?
Well, I love English, I love reading, I love writing, and I've always thought of myself as a communicator and a writer. And I'd been studying music my whole life. I didn't feel like I needed to major in it in college to be a successful musician. And so I always knew I wanted to make music for a living, but I didn't believe that getting a bachelor's in music was a requirement for that to happen. And so I figured, let me get my bachelor's in something else. If music doesn't work out, maybe I'll go to law school, maybe other things will work out. But my plan A was always music is gonna work out, but my plan B was, let's have another degree in something else, and if that works out, then so be it.
So I learned when you were a teenager, you won a contest, and I think it had to do with the question, how do you intend to make Black history?
That's right.
And you said music, and then you turn around as an adult, and you're the first African-American male to be an EGOT.
Not only did I say music, but I said I'm going to be a successful musician, but also use that position, that influence, that success, and translate that to going back and helping my community. And so I've tried to live both sides of that aspiration, where I've been able to succeed in music beyond my wildest dreams, but also use that platform to help people.
So when you compose, because you are a composer.
Yes, ma'am.
What comes first, the lyrics or the music, and how do you decide?
Usually the music comes first, and that's always been the best way for me to be inspired. So the music will come first, and then it'll lead me to lyrics and lead me to ideas about how to express what I want to say in the song. And then when I think about what the lyrics should do in the song, I want them to tell a story. I want them to feel really connected to who I am and be from an honest, authentic perspective, but also be something that's relatable to other people's lives and what they're going through also. So my goal has always been to take the personal and make it universal. So when I write lyrics, I'm thinking, well, how do I come from my own experience, my own honest look at life, and then connect it to how other people live.
Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done.
The song Glory from the movie Selma won a Golden Globe Award and an Academy Award for Best Original Song. John Legend explained to me how he got involved in the project.
Glory, it started with a phone call from my friend Common. Common was acting in the film Selma. Ava DuVernay directed that film, and they were getting close to wrapping the film up. They had all the footage recorded. She was starting to edit it, and she said, I need a great song to end this film with. And she talked to Common about it. Common, the first person he thought to call was me. So he called me. I was on tour in Europe at the time. And he started pitching different ideas for songs and song titles. And one of the song titles that he gave me was the word glory. And among all the other ideas, that was the one that just struck a chord with me, and I started humming something in my phone, and I sang, one day when the glory comes into my phone, it will be ours, it will be ours, and built a song around that idea. I played the piano and sang my part and then sent it to Common, and then Common wrote the beautiful lyrics that he wrote for the song. And of course, we were responding to what was in the film. We were responding to the story about Dr. King and John Lewis and everybody else who marched with them in Selma, but we were also writing about what was happening in America at the time. And this was 2013, 2014. So we were talking about Michael Brown and what happened in Ferguson. We're thinking about Trayvon, all these continued stories of us having to fight for our dignity as Black people in this country and fight to have equal rights in this country. We were thinking about all of that when we wrote the song, and that was the inspiration. So we were inspired by Dr. King, but we were also inspired by Black Lives Matter activists in the moment. And then what we've seen with the song is that that same song that was inspired by those activists has turned around and inspired other activists.
So, how did John Roger Stevens become John Legend, and why?
So it was a nickname that a guy named Jay Ivey was the first person to call me. Jay Ivey is a spoken word artist from Chicago. He was working with me and Kanye. We were working on College Dropout, and he started calling me John Legend. And I just looked at it as a nickname at first. I wasn't thinking I was gonna change my name, but eventually more and more people were knowing me by this nickname, and I had to decide whether or not I would go for it and use it as a stage name. And you know, part of me's thinking, you know, you don't even have a record deal yet. How are you gonna call yourself Legend? But the other part of me was thinking, you know what, I'm going to succeed in this business. I'm not gonna not take the name because I'm afraid of the name. So I went and decided I'm taking the name and announced myself to the world as John Legend. And then ever since then, I've been trying to live up to it.
Last question. You know Atlanta, bass music, rappers.
Trap music.
Who do you love as a rapper? Who would you listen to as a rapper?
Oh, well, one of my favorite rappers worldwide is Andre 3000, a great Atlantan. And Atlanta makes so much great music, and so many of my favorite writers, producers, artists are down here. And Atlanta is really the capital of Black culture, in my personal opinion. I'm not the only one who believes that, but I think so much great culture comes from here, and of course some of the great rappers, including Andre 3000, one of my personal favorites.
Can you rap?
No.
Come on. Why won't you try?
I'll leave it to the experts.
Why won't you try?
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out the recommended videos on your screen and subscribe to Peachtree TV to see the latest from Monica Pearson One-on-One.